1984 is a movie that is coming out to theaters and HBO Max. I'm fine with this one going to HBO Max. The other movies that are coming out next year that are going to HBO Max and theaters the same day, not a fan. This one I'm fine with. Finally got to see a big budget blockbuster on the big screen. The same thing happened with Tenet in September, but this one is a superhero movie, and I think it's a superhero movie you guys have been looking forward to. I cannot believe that for once in 2020, I'm going to be doing a spoiler review for a superhero movie. This is not the spoiler review. This is the spoiler-free review. I will have a spoiler review of Wonder Woman 1984 on Christmas, or maybe the day after Christmas. I'm going to film it tonight when I'm filming this review because I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to get HBO. I don't have HBO Max, so I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to get HBO Max by the time Christmas comes rolling around, or if I'm going to have enough time to see the movie again, so I need to get everything done in one night. But nonetheless, Wonder Woman 1984 is the sequel to 2017's Wonder Woman. Once again stars Gal Gadot as our titular character, and Wonder Woman 1984 obviously takes place in 1984, where Diana is united with Steve Trevor. Trevor? Where the hell did that come from? Is reunited with Steve Trevor. He has to learn to adjust. He basically takes on the role that Diana did in the first one, where he has to adjust to this new society because he somehow comes back while Diana comes into conflict with an oil tycoon, Maxwell Lord, played by Pedro Pascal, and Barbara Minerva and Sheeta, played by Kristen Wiig. I really love the 80s setting for this movie. I feel like after Stranger Things did the 80s setting, almost everything was like, oh hey, people love the 80s, people love nostalgia trips to the 80s, we're just gonna show shopping malls and drive-in theaters and shit like that, all the stuff that you love, video stores, the good old days where you could go to your local Blockbuster and rent a VHS. And this movie honestly felt like I was watching a big budget blockbuster. Like, let's just say the 1980s, you could make $200 million blockbusters. I feel like I was watching a $200 million blockbuster that was made in the 80s and came out in the 80s. There's obviously some movies nowadays where I feel like they're just made 2 decades too late. Like Venom feels like a 90s movie, and it should have come out in the 90s, but instead it came out in 2018. I guess you could say the same about Captain Marvel, where it's like, oh, that movie takes place in the 90s, so it feels like it's a 90s blockbuster, which I do not remember if I said that in my review. I may have. I also may not have had that same feeling with Captain Marvel, which for some reason I have that feeling with this movie, but I mean, that made this movie a little bit more fun for me, especially the scene after the opening that takes place in a mall. I was like, oh, older people watch this. This will be a trip down memory lane. Those strip malls, shopping centers, man, corporate America in the 80s. Great times, right? I don't know. I wasn't alive in the 80s. I do love the role reversal in this one between Diana and Steve Trevor. In the first one, Diana was trying to fit into a society that she wasn't familiar with. She was the outsider in the first one, and she followed Steve Trevor around, and he was teaching her, oh, hey, this is not like your society. But Steve Trevor comes back somehow. We'll get into that in my spoiler review. And now he's the one who has to learn to adjust to the 80s. Because this dude's been gone for almost 70 years. He's the one who has to adjust to the 80s. He's the one who has to learn about life nowadays. He has to learn about new technology in the 80s. That's actually kind of funny. And they give Steve Trevor some of the best humor in the movie. Gal Gadot and Chris Pine have that chemistry. They have it down pat. They're perfect. I feel like nobody else could have the chemistry that Gal Gadot has with Chris Pine. Let me talk about Chris Pine for a minute, because when you watch this movie, it had to give me a good enough reason as to why Steve Trevor returned, because he sacrificed himself in the first Wonder Woman. In a way, I was waiting for that moment. I understand why he came back, but I just wanted to see them do more with the situation, if that makes sense. It's almost like he didn't have to be in the movie. It was almost just kind of like Chris Pine was like, hey, I was in the first movie. Marvel still does not want me. I don't know why. I'm the Chris that's left out. I do not know why they don't want me. Can I just come back for the sequel? I feel like that's what Chris Pine's selling point to come back for the sequel was, but the way Steve Trevor is written into the story, it's almost like he has to be there, even though you can make a case that he doesn't need to be there, because he has to be there because he's the emotional glue for Diana. And without that emotional connection, then her speech, because we all know that Wonder Woman's gonna give a giant heroic speech at the end, then the speech that she has at the end just is meaningless and pointless. I understand bringing him back as the emotional glue for Diana, but I think I needed a little bit more of a better reason, or I think I just needed a little bit more from that situation. Pedro Pascal, the Mandalorian himself, Oberyn from Game of Thrones, the dude who got his face bashed in by the mountain, plays Maxwell Lord. And my God, this dude has all the screen presence in the world. He just slurps up all the energy on screen. Whenever he's not on screen, I'm like, please get back to Maxwell Lord, because he is just killing it as Maxwell Lord. Pedro Pascal just goes wild in this movie. He's so over the top. He's the definition of a cartoon 80s villain, but it's what the movie needed. It's what they were going for with this type of villain, because he's so power hungry. He's got that lust for power. He just wants everything for himself, so he was just owning it. And I gotta admit, Kristen Wiig surprised me. This is yet another lesson for me to not judge casting choices before you see the movie, because I thought she was going to be completely miscast as Cheetah. But, again, I should have watched the movie first before I judged that casting. I'll talk a little bit more about Cheetah and my negatives, but Kristen Wiig sold me, and I like the scenes where she got to interact with Gal Gadot, and she plays Barbara Minerva, so I liked when Barbara Minerva and Diana got to interact. I don't think there was a lot there, but I think it was just enough to establish a friendship. Patty Jenkins directs the action scenes, probably the best directed action scenes I've seen her direct. There's some really creative action sequences. The second half is just loaded with action sequences. The first half really takes its time to get into the story. The second half is where all the fun action goes down. It's really entertaining. That's where I was really starting to get into the movie, because you need those action sequences in a superhero movie. Let's face it, that's a big reason why we're here. We want to see these superheroes kick ass, and I think it's been in the trailer, but there's this really awesome chase sequence in the desert where Diana's like in between two trucks. It's awesome. There's a lot of action after that. I'm surprised with how little slow-mo Patty Jenkins incorporated into this movie, because that's always been a complaint of mine with her and Zack Snyder, because I think she was a protege of Zack Snyder. And that's why the first Wonder Woman, in a way, kind of declines in quality for me every time I watch it, because I feel like it's just needless slow-mo placed in spots where you don't even need it. That movie, it just felt like it was there to be stylistic. Here, there's very little of it. They never linger on it. It's very brief. There's a couple instances where I was like, oh shit, oh thank God. Thank you, Patty Jenkins. Didn't do it. I feel like she's finally breaking away from a staple that another director uses and is trying to create her own style. I really like that idea. However, what didn't work for me in Wonder Woman 1984, it's not necessarily the plot, but it's the thing that jumpstarts the plot. They're trying to chase down this MacGuffin. I guess you could call it a MacGuffin, but this object. At first I was like, what? Are you serious? They explain exactly what it is later on in the movie. I was like, okay, now I buy it. But at first, to jumpstart the plot, I thought to myself, I do not know where this is going to go. This is like some artifact. That's the best I can give you for a spoiler-free review. I'll get into it more in my spoiler review. I said to myself, it's gonna rely on this one object. And at the time when it was introduced, I said to myself, that seems a bit hokey. Even for a superhero movie, even for a way if you explain it where it's like, oh, it's from like a god or a goddess. It just seemed hokey to me. It got better as it went on. I accepted it as a plot device, as the thing that jump-started the plot, but it did feel like, at times, it was a bit hokey. Let's talk about Cheetah for a minute, because it's not Kristen Wiig, and it's not the fact that I think the CGI on Cheetah is horrible, because, let's just face it, in the trailer it looked like trash, but it looks a lot better in the movie. It's not perfect, but I saw it and I was like, I can roll with that. It's more as to how she's utilized. The way that they set up Barbara Minerva and Cheetah in this movie, it's almost like they were supposed to just have Barbara Minerva in this movie before she becomes Cheetah, and then like we get the hint, or like the mid-credit scene was supposed to be her becoming Cheetah, and then Cheetah would be the villain and the third Wonder Woman. Instead, they just kind of crammed everything with Barbara Minerva into this movie, into a movie that is, in a way, jam-packed with a lot of the plot. It just felt like that to me. Like, she was underutilized, or it felt like an instance where they wanted to save her for a third Wonder Woman movie, but decided at the last minute to throw Cheetah into this movie, and it does feel a bit shoehorned in for me. And I'm not going to sit here and say that this movie is great. It's definitely got a lot of inspiration, but the third act of the movie is beat by beat the third act of the first movie, and the third act of the first movie is the weakest part of the movie. The third act of this movie is by far the weakest part. It's literally the exact same thing in terms of visual style, and they throw in this color filter that makes this last 20 or so minutes look like a graphic novel that wasn't present previously in the movie. So that was a little off-putting to me. It was like they were trying to make the last acts of both films match up in terms of color grading and visual style. It didn't really work for me. Still, Wonder Woman 1984 is a very fun movie. It's a very entertaining movie, especially in that second half where it's loaded with action. Has all the great superhero moments you could ask for. There's definitely some major problems that I have with this movie, but for the most part, I enjoyed it. I'm happy we finally got to see a superhero movie on the big screen in 2020. I would say if you're safe enough, go to a theater, experience this in IMAX or even Dolby. I saw it in IMAX. It really enhanced my experience with this movie. Seeing a movie in IMAX on the big screen, I don't know if you've noticed, but I feel like I'm a little bit more energetic in this review than I have been for the past year doing reviews, because I finally got to see a big budget blockbuster on the big screen in an IMAX theater. I think that this is the definitive way to see this movie. If you have to stream it on HBO Max, then go ahead, or if you don't feel safe going to the theater, if your theaters are open, go ahead. But me personally, I think that this is the definitive way to experience a movie. But that's just me. That's my personal preference. I'm not telling everybody to go out to the theater if you don't feel safe and to risk your life. That's just me. I personally feel like this is the definitive way to watch a movie like this. Oh wait, yeah, I gotta rate this thing. I almost forgot about that. I'm gonna say you're really going to enjoy Wonder Woman 1984 with 3/4 worth of a bucket of popcorn. It's like a perfect 3.5 out of 5, you know? It's a good 2.5 hour, fun, entertaining superhero romp. Guys, thank you for watching my review of Wonder Woman 2. Stay tuned for more reviews coming very soon. You guys are the best. Thank you for watching. My name is Alex Madden, and I'll see you at the movies somewhere.